Excuse me. Your curtain. Please allow me to help.
Help? From you?
I didn't mean to offend. I just thought you should know that you're—
That I should know what? That some privileged white guy thinks his opinion matters? Get over your entitlement. I'm not some damsel in distress waiting for you to ride in on your high horse.
Just goes to show you exactly why she is so universally rejected right now.
When The Simpsons turns you into a punchline, you know it's bad. It's one thing to get dragged on Twitter. It's another to face a wave of bad press or lose a few roles. But when The Simpsons, arguably one of the most savage and iconic satirical shows in television history, decides to roast you by name, that's not just a joke, that's a message.
This is no ordinary apple, my dear. It's a magic wishing apple.
A wishing apple? You offer it to me freely. In place of the you would have a queen! Not white, but diverse, inclusive, and equitable! I will become the leader I know I can be! All shall love me and despair!
Oh, what has she done to you? Fear not. First love's kiss can break any curse.
And there are 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess. I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
Rachel Zegler didn't just get mocked, she got culturally eulogized. A brutal, unfiltered parody episode called Snow Woke, the reimagining, aired recently, featuring a tone-deaf, over-the-top princess named Rachel Z, a painfully obvious stand-in for the actress herself. The episode didn't bother with subtle digs or clever metaphors. It went straight for the throat. In the show, Rachel Z bans princes, rewrites fairy tales to serve her vision, and even breaks down live on Krusty the Clown's talk show, ranting about empowerment while the audience laughs at her. And here's the thing, people ate it up. The memes were immediate. Social media exploded. Viewers weren't just laughing, they were nodding along, saying, finally, someone said it. It wasn't satire anymore. It was public sentiment, broadcast through America's longest-running animated series. But how did we even get here? Just a couple of years ago, Rachel Zegler was Hollywood's new golden girl, the breakout star of West Side Story, handpicked by Steven Spielberg. Critics were calling her the next big thing. She had the voice, the charm, the look. She had Disney calling her for the lead role in Snow White, a part that has defined careers for nearly a century. She was poised to be a household name. But somehow, between red carpet interviews, viral TikToks, and mounting controversy, the narrative flipped and fast. From breakout star to industry punchline, her fall wasn't just sudden, it was spectacular.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite direct.
If you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business. You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it, you didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up.
And to understand how one of Hollywood's most promising newcomers got here, we have to rewind. Because before the memes, before the mockery, and before The Simpsons slammed the final nail in the coffin, Rachel Zegler was living a real-life fairy tale until it started falling apart. Before she became a headline, before she was a meme, before she was the target of a primetime cartoons joke, Rachel Zegler was living every young actress's dream. Born in 2001 to a Colombian mother and Polish father, she was a theater kid with a powerhouse voice and a camera-ready face. She wasn't just talented, she had that rare mix of old-school Hollywood glam and Gen Z relatability, singing covers on YouTube, crushing school musicals, winning vocal competitions before she could legally drink. She didn't have to chase fame, it came knocking. In 2018, she answered a Twitter casting call. Spielberg was rebooting West Side Story. She submitted a clip. Within months, she was cast as Maria. No big deal, just the lead in one of the most iconic musicals of all time, directed by a man with 3 Oscars. Her performance? Critics were floored. She lit up the screen. West Side Story may not have set the box office on fire, but it gave Rachel what every young actress dreams of: credibility, buzz, and clout. She went from suburban New Jersey to the Oscar stage in the blink of an eye, and Hollywood took notice. Then came the big one. Disney announced they were remaking Snow White. Not a supporting role, not a sidekick. The lead, the Disney princess. And not just any princess, the original, the one who started it all in 1937. Rachel was cast to step into those iconic shoes. It was a massive move. A Latina actress portraying the original fairest of them all? It was bold, progressive, conversation starting. For Disney, it was a statement. For Rachel, it was the moment. She was suddenly everywhere. Award shows, red carpets, late-night interviews. Social media couldn't get enough. People were excited, curious even. Could she pull it off? And for a brief, flickering moment, it looked like she could. She had the talent, she had the story, she had the momentum. But here's the thing about fairy tales. They can fall apart as fast as they begin. Because as Rachel stepped into the spotlight, her words, not the script, started changing the narrative. The more she spoke, the more the audience listened. But they didn't always like what they heard. And that's when things started to crack.
When the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Rachel Zegler's fall from grace didn't happen overnight. It didn't take a scandal, a leaked tape, or a wrongful charge. All it took was a microphone. The very interviews meant to promote Snow White ended up becoming the fuse that lit the fire. It started small, a clip here, a comment there, but it didn't take long for those moments to go viral, and not in the way Disney was hoping for. In one now infamous interview, Rachel called the prince from the 1937 Snow White a stalker. She said the original story was weird, outdated, and that her version of Snow White wouldn't be dreaming about true love, but becoming the leader she knows she can be. On paper, maybe it sounds empowering, but to audiences who grew up with that fairy tale, it came off differently, condescending, mocking, even hostile. And it wasn't just one quote, it was a pattern. In nearly every press junket, Rachel leaned heavily into modern girl boss ideology, without ever balancing it with any respect for the legacy of the original film. Her sound bites sounded less like excitement for the role, and more like critiques of the very thing she was hired to honor. The internet pounced. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about the movie. It was about her. Comments flooded in. Memes exploded. Edits splicing her interviews with clips from the original film painted her as someone trying to rewrite history. Viewers accused her of arrogance, of entitlement, of taking a childhood classic and turning it into a personal soapbox. And the criticism didn't just come from trolls. Even longtime Disney fans, people who wanted to love the remake, started expressing doubt. The magic wasn't there. The excitement was gone. And Rachel's tone, instead of adding to the story, started dragging it down. Every interview she gave seemed to make it worse. And with each clip that surfaced, the sentiment snowballed. Soon, it wasn't just a PR problem, it was a full-blown backlash. But while the fire was spreading online, Disney stayed quiet. And that silence, it spoke volumes. As the controversy built, there was one question on everyone's mind. Where was Disney? The backlash was undeniable. The interview clips were going viral almost daily. Memes mocking Rachel Zegler were everywhere. Twitter threads, Reddit posts, TikToks, all dissecting her tone, her message, her performance, even her facial expressions on red carpets. And through it all, Disney didn't say a word. No statement, no pivot, no rebranding effort, just business as usual. Meanwhile, things kept getting worse.
Remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarfs. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures. You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group, you just erase that whole image. The argument should have been from Peter Dinklage, there's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there. If the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the character.
One of the biggest flashpoints? The dwarfs, or rather, the lack of them. Disney had decided to replace the iconic 7 dwarfs with a vague group of magical creatures, a move that sparked yet another wave of backlash. Critics from the dwarfism community, including actor Peter Dinklage, called out the studio for erasing meaningful representation. If the story is offensive, Dinklage said, change the story, don't erase the characters. And once again, Rachel was in the center of the storm. Her involvement in that decision, or lack of pushback, was seen by many as another sign of disconnect. The damage was starting to show. When the film finally hit theaters, the results were brutal. Despite Disney's global marketing machine and the massive brand power behind Snow White, the movie underperformed. Big time. The box office numbers were underwhelming. But worse than that, the audience reaction. The IMDb rating crashed to 1.6, making it one of the worst reviewed Disney movies of all time.
I am walking into Snow White, 2 p.m., now seating. Let's see how empty it is. I hope it's off the boat we go. I hope. Sound like I hear a couple of people. joke.
And it wasn't just critics. Everyday viewers left scathing reviews. The film was called joyless, unrecognizable, even unwatchable. People didn't just skip the movie, they celebrated its failure. Some even filmed themselves walking into near-empty theaters, narrating the experience of seeing Snow White completely alone. One now viral clip shows a woman counting the attendees in her screening. 1, 2, yep, that's it. Cut to the screen. Rachel Zegler smiling, alone on screen, as the seats around her sat empty.
I think we're one of the only ones there, just like Rachel Zegler, as it turns out, and we part with this video of Rachel Zegler alone in a theater watching herself. One of the most unlikable humans.
That
ever.
is sadder than when the original Snow White eats the apple.
It was haunting, embarrassing, and symbolic. And through it all, Disney said nothing. But the internet, the audience, they said everything. And they weren't done yet, because what came next would take things from embarrassing to irreversible. At some point, the backlash stopped being about Snow White. It became about Rachel Zegler herself. And once that shift happened, the internet didn't just criticize her. It turned her into content. Every clip of her speaking, every quote pulled from an interview, every red carpet appearance was dissected, stitched, edited, and memed. Her name became a shortcut for tone-deaf activism, a walking example of how not to handle press, and the internet ran wild with it.
Oh wow, Snow White flopped. Who is surprised? You cast arguably the least genuine, most out of touch, and disliked person in her industry, and her industry is Hollywood. And the bad guy is Gal Gadot.
Rachel Zegler just keeps making things worse with the Walt Disney Company. The more that she tries to defend this movie, the more that she tries to spew her agenda onto the general public, it's only making matters worse. Not just for Bob Iger, but for whatever is left of the image of Disney as a whole.
But the turning point, the moment things truly crossed the line from criticism to full-blown mockery, came when an AI-generated profile surfaced using Rachel's likeness. It wasn't real. She had nothing to do with it. But that didn't stop it from spreading like wildfire. People shared the images, laughed about them, commented as if it was just another bizarre chapter in her already chaotic media arc. And the wild part? Most people believed it, even if just for a moment. That's how far her public image had fallen. The fact that a fake account using her face wasn't instantly dismissed as impossible, but instead seen as plausible, said everything. This wasn't about movie roles anymore, it was about reputation, and it didn't stop there. One particularly brutal meme showed Rachel alone in a theater, watching her own film. No audience, no applause, just her and an empty room. The video cuts between her smiling on screen and the eerie silence of the theater, drawing a cruel but undeniable parallel between her on-screen persona and her real-life situation. She had gone from red carpets and Oscar stages to viral videos framed around failure. Even hashtags started trending that had nothing to do with the movie. Things like Rachel Zegler out of touch and how had Girl Boss gone wrong. And perhaps the most brutal twist of all, the film's original message, one about empowerment, equality, and rewriting the fairy tale, was completely buried beneath the noise. The very thing she tried to champion had become a punchline. At this point, the mockery wasn't just online. It wasn't just fans. It wasn't even just the media. It was the industry. And it was only a matter of time before Hollywood responded the way Hollywood always does, quietly and decisively. Hollywood never says it out loud. Studios won't go on record. Executives won't tweet. There are no formal announcements, no dramatic statements. But when the industry decides to distance itself from someone, the silence says everything. And for Rachel Zegler, that silence started getting loud. After the chaos surrounding Snow White, the projects that had once been lined up for her suddenly began to vanish, one after another. Roles she was rumored to be attached to were mysteriously recast. Voice work for Toy Story spin-offs, gone. A few indie projects that had her name floating around, delayed, shelved, or restructured. Nothing was said officially, of course, but insiders began leaking whispers. Producers weren't sure she was marketable. Publicists didn't want the baggage. Casting directors just stopped calling. And in an industry built on perception, the message was clear. Rachel Zegler had become a PR liability. You could feel it in the shifts, how her red carpet invitation started drying up, how major magazines that once featured her in rising stars lists quietly moved on. Even other celebrities, ones who once praised her, kept their distance. And it didn't help when reports surfaced about a growing tension between Rachel and Wonder Woman star Gal Gadot, her co-star in Snow White. During a high-profile awards show, the two presented together, and viewers instantly noticed the ice. No eye contact, no interaction, zero chemistry, and the internet did what it always does. Zoomed in, clipped it, captioned it, and turned it into a whole narrative. Gal wants nothing to do with her, one post claimed. Can you blame her? Another asked.
Please welcome Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot.
Visual effects push the boundaries of what we see on screen.
Their work makes the impossible seem possible.
With breathtaking ambition, they create magic that wraps its arms around our wildest imaginations.
Here are the nominees for Best Visual Effects.
And through all of this, Rachel remained mostly silent, posting sporadically, sometimes emotionally, and at one point referencing the mental toll. I can be having the best day and still wish people would stop sending me threats. It was raw, honest, and heartbreaking, but it did little to shift the momentum, because by now, she wasn't just seen as a struggling actress. She was viewed as an example, a case study, proof of how quickly things can turn when the public stops rooting for you. And in the middle of that storm, Rachel Zegler faced something even worse than bad press being quietly erased. There's a certain moment in pop culture where a celebrity crosses an invisible line, from being criticized to being caricatured. And when The Simpsons decides to put you in their crosshairs, it's usually the final blow. That's exactly what happened to Rachel Zegler. In one of the show's more ruthless parodies in recent memory, The Simpsons aired an episode called Snow Woke, the reimagining. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't clever wordplay, it was a full-on mockery of Rachel's Snow White role, and more importantly, her entire public persona. The character in the episode? Rachel Z, a self-important actress who rewrites fairy tale history, bans princes, and gives dramatic empowerment speeches to villagers who couldn't care less. At one point, she's shown spiraling on a talk show, melting down live on air while the audience watches in confusion. The entire segment plays like a funeral, not for the movie, but for Rachel's image. And it hit hard, not because it was funny, but because it was accurate. The parody wasn't really about Snow White at all. It was about the perception that had built up around Rachel over the past year. Out of touch, obsessed with image, and completely disconnected from what audiences actually wanted. The Simpsons doesn't go after you when you're merely controversial. They go after you when you've become part of the conversation. And for Rachel, that conversation had turned vicious. This wasn't just satire, it was cultural sentencing, and the audience didn't push back. They laughed, they reposted, they agreed. Thousands of people who had once been curious about Rachel were now gleefully watching her be dismantled animated frame by animated frame. The industry didn't comment. It didn't have to, because when The Simpsons roasts you like that, the message is clear. You've gone from rising star to cautionary tale. And just like that, the girl once dubbed Disney's next icon had been immortalized not in legacy, but in satire. So here we are, Rachel Zegler, once hailed as the future of Hollywood, now reduced to a punchline. Her casting in Snow White was supposed to be a fairy tale ending. Instead, it turned into a very public unraveling, complete with viral interviews, PR disasters, industry cold shoulders, and the ultimate pop culture humiliation, a Simpsons parody. But the question now isn't about what happened, it's about what happens next. Because if there's one thing Hollywood loves more than a rise or a fall, it's a redemption arc. The industry is filled with comebacks, from stars who tanked their careers and returned stronger, to artists who found success in entirely new lanes after hitting rock bottom. So the real question is, can Rachel Zegler pull it off? Right now, she's got three things working against her: a damaged public image, a cold industry, and a mountain of bad press. But she also has something most stars don't: time. She's young, she's still talented, and if she plays her cards right, she could rebuild. But the next move, it has to be flawless. Because this isn't just about Snow White, it's about how you handle the spotlight. It's about authenticity, awareness, and understanding what audiences actually want to see. And maybe, just maybe, it's about knowing when to stop talking and let the work speak for itself. So whether Rachel Zegler becomes a forgotten footnote in Disney's history or rewrites her narrative completely, one thing's for sure: the world will be watching. And this time, they won't be so quick to forgive.